Many Constant Worlds is a meta-disjointed journey through the Dark Tower series by Stephen King. I am Kat, she, her, and it's been a busy weekend. We've done so much this weekend for the podcast.
I'm Taryn, he, they, and Kat won't quit gently roasting me. And somehow I think she thought I wasn't gonna say exactly that right there.
I don't know, you might have had something better.
I don't think I had something better.
Yeah, you never
Was
know.
I supposed to have had something better?
No, but you kind of make up shit on the... I mean, we both do at this point.
Yeah,
Nothing is
fair.
planned anymore.
No.
Frankly, it's lucky there's even scripts happening at this point.
Episode 1 and episode 2 were like really planned.
I know, right?
And they kind of blow, so...
Improv is our sweet spot.
Yeah.
And no shame. Like, I love improv. I grew up on Whose Line.
Yeah. So can we get like a name? Can somebody give us a name? I'm hearing Sam. Okay, we got a Sam.
I'm sorry, it has to be Tommy.
No, what about a place? Can somebody give us
Portland.
a place? Portland. Yes, I hear Portland. You're all absolutely screaming Alabama, but I hear Portland.
And you know what? For once, we're not just trying to delay talking about the thing that we read. We actually seem to be enjoying the thing that we read, and we're not just killing time. We're just having fun.
Oh my god, The Shining's been amazing.
So we fully support content warnings and taking care of your own mental health. So here are the content warnings for this book and thus this episode.
I'm just going to mentally check out for the next 20 minutes because this is going to take a minute, so...
Yeah. Alcoholism, violence, child abuse, racial slurs, domestic abuse, murder, blood, addiction, physical abuse, death, gore, racism, emotional abuse, mental illness, death of a parent, confinement, toxic relationship, body horror, sexism, sexual content, suicidal thoughts, fire, gaslighting, grief, car accident, homophobia, ableism, so much fucking ableism, child death, torture, pedophilia, sexual assault, sexual violence, body shaming, stalking, and animal death.
Ableism like it's their job.
Oh my god, there's so much ableism in this book. So much ableism.
A lot of these content warnings like it's their job.
Yeah. Well, it's Stephen King. Maybe he felt like it really was his job.
And the 70s.
So we read part 3 of The Shining, titled The Wasp's Nest. I think it's The Wasp's Nest. I'm not looking it up. That's what I wrote down. So Jack starts out reshingling the roof. He finds a wasp's nest, gets stung, then bug bombs, then takes the nest to give to his 5-year-old child. Through this, he is remembering what happened to George Hatfield and is constantly justifying to himself why it wasn't his fault. Any of the things that happened the way they happened, constantly his thought is how things happened to him. Because in Jack's mind, he's just a nice guy with a temper.
I have armchair therapy thoughts about that for later.
Yeah. Jack imagines George as his young character in his play, but doesn't believe himself to be the stern villain of a headmaster staring down the younger version of himself in both jealousy and probably an honest amount of trying to curb that younger version of himself to make different choices. So, what would you say to your younger self if you had the opportunity to try and curb, hey, look, been here, done all of this and done the outcome. If we stop, maybe it'll be better.
How young?
Whatever point you want to go with.
If I could talk to my 12-year-old self, I think I'd tell them, this is not forever. It seems that way because so much of what's happening to you, and when you're talking to a child, it is happening to them, not from them. So much of what's happening to you is non-permanent. Your family doesn't have to be permanent. And someday you will be in a place where you can give that up. You're not just fat. And in fact, at this age, you're not fat at all. But you're really unhappy in your body. And you're going to have words for that someday in the future. But get right with your brain And once you're right with your brain, you'll be at that place where you can learn why it is you're so disgusted with your body. It's not that you're fat. And then I'd give them the, like, typical stay in school thing, but I think I'd be able to tailor it better, as in, you need to start hammering every adult that you meet over the head with, I have ADHD, help me. I have ADHD, help me. Somebody help me. Get me a test. Get me a fucking test. And then, even if they do or they don't, you are a resourceful person. Get your, like, study about what that means for you and what are tricks that will help you with your brain so that way you can be everything that you could be, because you are so much more than this shit happening around you right now. That's what I would tell little 12-year-old me.
Love it.
Thank you. I've had to do it in therapy before, so that conversation was already locked and loaded.
You know what? That's fair. That's fair. And you know what? I'm glad it's still there.
What would you tell younger you?
I think that if I were to talk to a younger version of myself, I don't know how young I'd go. Like, probably around high school, maybe middle school, but middle schoolers are shit. So I don't know that I even want to talk to myself in middle school, but maybe. Either way, I think that at any point somewhere around that vicinity, if I were to go through this, it'd be fine. I think I'd probably just say, like, regardless of what you are feeling right now, embarrassed, anxious, nervous, whatever, this shit around you doesn't matter. Middle school, high school, just get through it. Because it doesn't fucking matter. You know, you hear all these people who are like, oh yeah, high school was the best years of my life. That's sad. I'm sorry if that is you. It's not true for a lot of people for a lot of reasons. And I definitely am not one of those people. It's not like I had the worst high school experience of my life or anything like that, but it's just different once you are an adult. Being an adult is different than what you are led to believe as a child.
Yeah.
And none of that crap matters. You are just accessories to your parents' lives. It's like, that's even a line in It. You know, you're a kid, you get moved. You don't have any control of those things. It just is what it is. You are an accessory to another adult's life. And it doesn't mean that, like, your parents don't love you. It's just you don't have the control to go, oh, I don't want to be in this place anymore, so I'm not gonna. Whereas an adult, you do. You get some control over things. So, yeah, that would be my thing. Doesn't fucking matter.
I was gonna say, I think that's fair. I think that's... How do you think that change would reverberate out into the rest of your life for you?
I mean, I feel like being a child, I'm probably not going to listen the same way George really didn't want to listen. A young Jack wouldn't have listened either. And I do feel like some of Jack's issue is because he sees himself in George, and not only is he dealing with his own, like, I'm old now. Yeah. But it is a case of, like, seeing it, and it's like, God, I don't want you to repeat the same mistakes I made, and I can help you. Because I also think about this with Baldur's Gate, when you have Mole wanting to take the deal with Raphael, and Karlach is so like feeling this moment of like, no, it's not going to be this way. And, you know, she's having that moment of, or like, if I had been found by like Jaheira, would my life have been different? And it's like, yeah, it would have been. Of course it would have been. So.
But because it is you talking to your younger self, do you think there's things that you could say that would convince yourself, like, hey, I know, like, all them out there, they're assholes, but we are cool. Like,
I don't know. I would like to think so, but I feel like that's being very generous. Because in reality, there's a reason you're like that in the first place. And it's because you're just not ready to Because you hear people say this shit all the time, and it's like, oh, yeah, whatever. You know, you think you know better. You so don't.
I think that's why I think I could do it. But I think it's because, like, young me had no one in their corner.
Yeah.
And I think me being able to show up and say, like, look, I can't stay for long. But, like, I believe in us. And I can tell you, you're on the right track. But if you follow this right track and you make plans to, and you do these things to support yourself and get mentally better, like, set your sights on Harvard if you want to. You have the ability to do it. You have to just give yourself the tools. There will never be a point in your life where anybody is going to hand you a single fucking tool.
Yeah.
You are going to have to forge every single one of them out of a stone block on your own. But when you're young, some of that block is made of Play-Doh. And you can do it. And I know you can do it because I have already done so much of it in the future. You're getting a head start because I'm telling you to get a head start. I believe that I would know how to explain that to myself in ways myself would understand and be motivated to want to, like, get that head start, I guess. I believe you could too, that you would know the things to say to yourself to get yourself to trust you. I don't think I could say it to your younger self. Your younger self would basically look at me and be like, who the fuck are you? I don't think that you could say it to my younger self. My younger self would, like, just end up scared, and you would just be yet another adult putting pressure on somebody who was about to, like, literally was about to explode and shut down from pressure. But I think that we as ourselves would know what to say, because we as ourselves have both had to dig our way out of the rubble of explosions from too much pressure.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. You might be right.
It might be too optimistic. I don't know.
I don't know, but I guess we'll see should anybody ever finish that damn time machine.
Please, if you have a time machine, contact us so we can run this experiment.
We will change the past.
You know who seems to think that he is breaking under too much pressure, but in reality it's more like his mask is starting to slip, like his narcissism mask is starting to slip, is fucking Jack Torrance.
Yeah.
I have feelings about this motherfucker.
You should. So, it is also revealed that George has a stutter. Sounds a little bit like our buddy Bill. All the while, there's also the shenanigans with the, like, bike. Could that have been Silver? I don't know. It's interesting little pieces of it that are in here, because obviously it's written before, and Dick Halloran ends up being our link to it. But we've got George, who stutters, like Bill, who has a brother named George and stutters, and it is a bike that is hit.
And that he says he had never stuttered before.
Yeah. So later, Danny tries to summon up Tony and ends up sending himself into a trance. He stutters, which pisses Jack off, and also mentions a timer. Something Jack understands, but Danny does not, assuming it's true how that all went down. And Jack didn't just imagine any parts of it, because what we learn is that because of George's stutter, Jack had fucked up with the timer to give good reason for getting rid of George, and Jack has convinced himself that this was all for George's own good, because of course a stutter is an embarrassment in Jack's eyes. So he was just helping. He knows better. Danny has a nightmare, then wakes up to 3 wasps on him. The nest wasn't so empty. Jack and Wendy hear Danny screaming, and Jack eventually contains the nest and gets it the fuck out of there, because maybe it was not a great idea to do this in the first place. I don't know, the 70s were wild. They go down to the doctor and Sidewinder. The doctor asks Danny about Tony and assures Jack and Wendy that it's nothing to worry too much about, but Wendy isn't so convinced, especially since Danny was able to read her mind about her dead sister, Eileen.
The name of the doctor seemed like a thing to me. Bill Edmonds. But yeah, that I just saw the name and I was like, this feels like something.
Yeah. It's more like it should, if I feel like, because again,
Big
Bill.
Yeah.
And Eddie.
Yeah.
Jack ends up finding a scrapbook in the hotel and in a manner similar to Misery. Well, in truth, as The Shining came first and Misery is the copycat here. Regardless, we get the background of the Overlook in a series of newspaper articles kept similar to Annie's murder scrapbook trophy. They got a Musk-esque weird rich dude who's basically obsessed with the Overlook and keeps buying it in different ways. Honestly, today this shit really would have been done in like a Twitter feed, like updates versus a scrapbook. Jack had the same question I had reading this bit, like, whose fucking scrapbook is this? Why is this here? So weird. It is made clear that the family is largely taking their meals in the kitchen. Danny mentions feeling traces of Halloran's personality in there because parts of us also get left behind places. Chapter 19, which was going to get special attention from this podcast no matter what it was about, of this book, it's just the inspiration story for The Shining. Danny is outside room 217 and sees a fire hose as a giant snake. Jack's interest in the history of the Overlook grows, so he hits up the library and Sidewinder. Then he makes the stupid choice to blow up his own fucking life. Similar to Shawshank, where we see prisoners who are afraid of the outside world, so they try to go back in. Jack is doing the same thing. He only understands how to function if he's the victim, an underdog, Jack against the world, because then it's never his fault.
And more on that too. I have so much more on that too.
So in true self-destructive pattern, he goes and calls Ullman and stirs shit. When back at the hotel, Al Shockley calls. Jack, without shame, admits to what he did, and then he intends to write a book about the history of the hotel, to which Al is not happy to hear. Al owns 35% of the hotel and believes Jack's book would be bad for business and shuts down Jack's shit. Jack does ask if Derwent, that's the weird musky kind of dude, and I mean musky as in Elon Musk, if Derwent had a connection to Al, which Al doesn't deny but says it's not really Jack's business. The tensions are rising in the house. Wendy decides she's going to check in with Danny, and if she and him need to bounce, they will. Danny doesn't want to go to his grandmother's and tells his mom he'd rather stay at the hotel. While Wendy and Danny are gone, we get the scene that had been the one that scared me when I first read this book, which is the hedge animals. It's less creepy now, maybe because I know it's coming, or maybe there's a worse one later that I actually am remembering. Regardless, the hedge animals move and are coming for Jack. Eventually, he closes his eyes and they reset, which is great set against what happens when we're around the end of this part where Danny is in room 217, sees an old woman in the tub, tries to run away and closes his eyes, but instead of opening them to everything back to normal like Jack had with the hedge animals, he gets a dead hand touching him. And that's the end of part 3.
He gets dead hand touch.
Yeah, because they're not like pictures in a book for him, but they are for Jack.
So far.
We
will see how that continues. Because I personally think so far that the splitting headaches he's getting and the fact that these things are happening, he has a shine. He has a shine that he keeps tamped down with alcohol all the time. And now he is alcohol free in a place that even somebody without a shine might catch on that it's haunted, constantly being bombarded with spiritual energy, which is why he's getting massive migraines, because that was how it felt when Danny attacked Halloran, just the training attack Halloran, and he didn't use all his power. But if an entity or several entities in the house are constantly beating down Jack's shields, which wouldn't be that strong because he probably doesn't exactly work on putting them up, because most of the work he does to put them up is alcohol. They're constantly battering at his shields. He has a massive headache all the time, and he's constantly craving a drink because that was a good way to bolster his forces in his head against that shit. That is the reading that I took over all of part 3 for what is happening to Jack right now.
I think that's a fair position to take with it. I think for me, because I was seeing so much of it, and the fact that Danny is the one like, Pennywise makes it clear, like, it's easier to get children.
Yeah.
And it's because their imaginations can run so wild. And I do feel like we're seeing a lot of what started building out it in The Shining.
Yeah.
Long before he actually started writing it, even if he does start, you know, getting influenced by the Atlanta child murders and things like that, which should be happening in the years that he is writing this, because we're like late 70s. It is so... It is so interesting that Jack is able to close his eyes and reopen them, and it's all back to normal. Like, the hedge animals are where they belong. Danny legitimately tells himself and calms himself down with that, whereas Jack is just, like, panicking, and he does this. But Danny consciously chooses to listen to Dick Halloran's words echoing in his head, and it doesn't work.
I wonder if it's because, as a writer, Jack hasn't given up imagination entirely in the way that some other adults do.
Yeah.
He can't have. He has to constantly be imagining the creative work that he does. And he's working on a play right now.
Well, and we see him constantly do, even on the roof.
Yes, so he's constantly imagining and being in places in his head where he's fantasizing.
Yeah.
So he's...
That's how he got stung in the first place.
Yeah. So he is engaging in a level of, like, internal play, like internal imaginative play, that I personally think most adults really do anyways.
Yeah.
But the general consensus is maybe adults don't do this that much, but someone who's a writer and someone who's a child do. And what's more interesting is that he first really sees it and really gets attacked for sure by the hedge animals, because he has to imagine what the animals would become in order to cut them.
Yeah.
He doesn't have like a reference. He has to do it just by mind. And so he's imagining these animals as animals to cut them, and he has no alcohol to block his shine, no mental faculties to block his shine. He's been getting bombarded constantly to bring his, like, defenses down, and then that's the first place where he, like, straight up sees them moving.
Yeah.
Personally, that's how I'm taking this book, is that that's our first big clue that, like, he absolutely does shine. Dick Halloran couldn't tell because he still just had, like, a fucking wall 6 inches thick between him and the shine. And that wall ain't there anymore. Or it's just been getting it's getting the Berlin Wall treatment by everything at the Overlook trying to claw its way in.
Well, and I think that with Dick Halloran and the way he was trying to assess Jack, and even just what he thinks and does with Danny, because he is trying to convince himself that it's going to be okay, because he knows something's going to happen.
Yep.
And he's got that, like, intuition, wherever it's coming from, but, like, that gut feeling that something bad is going to happen here. And he's trying to tell himself, no, you're overreacting. And so, did he really look all that hard? Did he try to get through Jack's defenses in the first place? Or did he go, no, I can't?
Yeah.
There's something off about that dude. But maybe I'm just looking at him and I'm seeing the last caretaker who killed his family. And I don't want to think that this man will also just kill his family. Because Dick doesn't really talk about Grady. And the fact that Grady was there last time and he had, 2 daughters and a wife, and that he did these things. He seems to want to, like, navigate around it. Even though he knows he's not coming back. This was his last season. And everything like that. And then we also get the fact that the little suite that the Torrances are staying in, Dick lived in while he was there for the season. And if traces of him are in the kitchen, I have to imagine traces of him are also in that room. And they may also offer a level of protection.
Yeah.
To them. Though, obviously, Dick likes to cook. His heart is in the kitchen. How much was Dick Halloran maybe being in denial and not wanting to poke at that too much? Because if you start to, you tear right through. And you have to face the fact that the odds are very good that whatever the fuck is here at the Overlook caused Grady to do what Grady did. And did Dick meet Grady too and meet his wife and his children? And did he also notice some traits about Grady that made him more likely to go and murder his whole fucking family?
He might have. I wonder, too, if he saw exactly what Jack was. If he saw exactly what was happening there. And, I mean, if you tell a 6-year-old who's already very in love with his dad, like, in a 6-year-old way, and is just very entranced by his dad and his daddy's boy, if you tell him, well, your mama has shine like how all moms have shine, but your daddy shines like you do, that kid's gonna run straight to his dad and be like, guess what Dick Halloran said? And we are the same, and teach me to do it. Like, he couldn't. And if Jack had not told Danny already, it really wasn't Dick's place to tell him. But I think you're right. I do think there was some level of optimism because it couldn't be stopped. There was a reason that he was kind of, even as a joke, most people wouldn't be like, I'm taking this one to Florida.
Just because we're talking here, the thing that comes to my mind, because so much of this book feels like laying some of the seeds for it makes me almost, like, in my brain I went, oh, okay, so Jack is Pennywise and Dick is the turtle, because the turtle's like, yeah, no, like, it is, like, I can't change anything.
Fuck, I could see that.
And Jack, what we know already, it will ultimately be the Eater of Worlds, because he's destroyed their life multiple times now. And he even tries to do it again. He tried to destroy their life by calling and going off on him. So Jack is the destroyer of worlds. I mean, you could qualify that to Eater. He blows up his family's life again and again. And it's always someone else's fault. At least within The Shining, Dick and Jack have to occupy a space in Danny's brain. And they do. Because he thinks about what Tony showed him, of hearing his dad and seeing his dad running through the halls, and then also the man that he knows. And then whenever he's trying to find protections against the things in the Overlook, he's thinking about what Dick told him. It's like pictures in a book. Can't hurt you, it's just pictures in a book. Which is the other very similar to It thing that I notice, is that we get these repetitive sentences, because the other one that's very repetitive and it's hitting onto Jack and Danny is this inhuman place makes human monsters. And we had Bill doing the whole, like, it hits its hand against the post thing for his, stuttering to get through speech therapy.
Yeah.
And he had to say that in order to successfully, overcome it.
It feels very like one of the schools of magic, where it's the ritual. It doesn't really matter what the ritual is. It's doing the ritual that causes the magic to occur. So in the scene where, like, the very ending scene, where Danny closes his eyes and then still gets the dead hand on him, I have been wondering through the book when he does that. So Dick had told him, if you need me, just call for me. And till now, when he was afraid, he did always say Dick Halloran's name. Dick Halloran told me. Dick told me. It's like pictures in a book. Dick said. Dick said. And I had started to wonder if when he's doing this, Dick is actually, like, mentally being there with him to help banish whatever thing is scaring him. Dick won't go in 217, and he told him he won't go in 217. He mentally will not cross into 217 either, I think. Even if he's thinking to himself, it's like a picture in a book. Dick said it's like a picture in a book. Dick ain't going, like, it's time for Danny to have to just face consequences because he was warned to do not go in there, and I won't go in there. So there is no Dick mentally stretching across from Florida or wherever he is.
Well, and there'd be no traces of him left. Not like in the kitchen or in the unit they sleep in.
Yeah. And those traces wouldn't be getting refreshed by him, like, psychically leaving, like, psychic goo. because he's visiting to keep an eye on all of them. He's not in there with Danny. And Danny made his choice. He wanted to... Curiosity killed the cat, but satisfaction brought it back.
What was interesting with that, too, is that the last time he says that bit is he adds in the word hope, and we literally just watched Shawshank, which we know has a big deal about hope.
Yeah.
And the hope of satisfaction brings it back, is what the last version of that, because he does say that a couple of times, too, because he's like, no, I want to do this. But that hope, and the hope was all capped in that edition, too.
Yeah.
Obviously, the entire thing through Shawshank is like, you cannot give up hope.
Yeah.
You have to keep hoping. And it works out for Andy.
Yeah, it does.
Like, it works out really well for Andy. Doesn't work out so good for Danny.
No, it does not.
Danny gets dead hand.
Maybe Danny will find out he wants dead hand.
Maybe. Anyways... So, if you could not tell, I very much feel like Jack takes zero accountability for his fucking life. Like, to the point it was really pissing me off because it was constantly stuff happens to Jack.
Yeah.
It always happens to Jack. Wendy nags Jack. She made him drink because she nagged him so much. It's really her fault that he drank and then he broke his kid's arm and... all of these things. But once he removes the drink, when we get to like George, where he is sober and he has to accept the fact that he was sober during that. Well, George like pissed him off and he's a nice guy with a temper. But he does have a temper, but George brought it onto himself because, you know, it was something like, I get that George was slashing his tires. Never acceptable to do this to a 17-year-old, because last episode we weren't sure how old George was. Now we know he was 17.
I'm so interested to find out if George was actually slashing his tires.
Right? And I couldn't believe, like, the very concept of the woman who comes out and catches Jack beating the shit out of this kid, and then when Jack's kind of, like, coming back to, that she left that kid with Jack still to go get other help and didn't go, you know what? No, you go get the help. I will help the child you've beaten. The very concept of that.
Yeah.
Just, how? Why?
So, why? I was actually really, at first, I was giving really big kudos to King for that, for the way that Jack was talking with the whole, like, things happened to me.
Yeah.
Like, everything was happening to me. That is absolutely how it can feel when you are in the midst of, like, uncontrolled mental illness, is that everything happens to you. The way that you start to climb out of that hole is to stop letting everything happen to you. You start to take the reins back of your life and stop letting that happen. And you also stop phrasing it that way, because no, these things weren't just happening to Jack, but it is really enlightening to see that that's how he felt.
Yeah.
There is an almost throwaway moment where he talks about being a kid and being savagely beaten by his father all the time. That happened to Jack.
Yeah.
And that is true. And it really seems like Jack carried that through his life. And because that happened to Jack, that is a trauma that was done upon him. He had no control. Every bad thing that follows after, he has no control in, is how he feels. He feels like, well, if a bad thing happens, it's like that time when I was in, a horrible situation that I had no control over. So every bad thing that comes after is the same and I have no control over it, which is just patently not true. He can choose not to drink. He can choose not to hit his students. He can choose, even if he wants to be an alcoholic, he can choose not to bring that into his workplace. He can choose not to bring that around his wife and child. Like, there are alcoholics who don't go as hard as he does. He made those choices on his own. He did not make the choice to be a child who was savagely beaten. And I feel like that's where that starts for him. But then he keeps rolling through and making other choices. It might be that he could not figure out how to get out of that cycle without professional help. I absolutely understand that. Hurt people. And sometimes it's hard to break out of that cycle. And that's what I feel like Stephen King has done a beautiful job of exemplifying. That he does not understand. Because as far as he's concerned, he's better than his dad was.
Yeah.
And we are reading a book about a man who is desperate to break that cycle, but quite frankly does not know how. I had really liked it up until, like, the drinking happened to him. Most addicts and alcoholics, most people with any kind of substance use disorder I've ever met, are pretty well aware that that is their issue. They know that there could be some things in their past that caused it or helped them along the path to it, but they're pretty fucking aware that it did not happen to them, with the exception of, like, people who've been sex trafficked, who, like, woke up with needles in their arms, like, because the point was to force them to have a substance use issue to keep them there. Yeah. Like, now you're addicted to this. You are under my control more entirely. Other than that, though, most of them are pretty open, like, no, this is my issue. Even though I won't get on a huge soapbox about it. I will get on a tiny soapbox about it. There's other things too, like lower socioeconomic classes. When you're bored all day long because you have either your town has no entertainment that is accessible for you and you have to drive an hour to the nearest movie theater, concert arena, nightclub, fucking anything to do after 7 p.m. Alcohol and drugs are suddenly the best option. Because I can't tell you how many nights after I turned like 18, I spent 2 towns over just hanging out in somebody's garage. Because that was just what we did.
Yeah.
What else were you gonna do? And then also, when you're in those rungs, alcohol at the very least is just gonna happen. But then other drugs start popping up, partially to numb the pain of the back-breaking labor that those people are doing. When someone gets off a 12 to 14 hour shift, like mining, or I don't know, I had a friend who used to work doubles at like a gas station. And that doesn't sound like backbreaking work, but he was wrecked by the end of every one. He was constantly like, where is my Four Loko? Because you got to do something. Sorry, I don't mean to just rampage.
I also had a friend who worked at a convenience store. And generally, there were 2 people on shift. One person running the actual cash register, and then one person who was having to do everything in the store alone because the person at the cash register can't leave. You never know when someone's going to come in. And they were working in a much bigger town. That's why there were 2 of them. Yeah. But my mom used to work at a gas station. And she worked alone because it was not that same kind of like situation. So a lot of times she was by herself doing all of the things. Like my dad would go in sometimes and help her with like the hauling things around. But no, you're the one who's refilling all of the fridges with sodas, which are not, they don't come in singles. They come in a big ass box. And that box is heavy because it's carrying a lot of things. And some of those things are glass bottles. Some of those things are, tall boys, things like that. And it is a lot of back-breaking labor, and you have to move fast because how many gas stations do you go in that are understocked?
Yep.
They're always super well stocked. That's the job.
Or the book warehouse.
Oh, yeah.
Which literally broke your body.
Yeah.
Permanently broke your body.
Yep.
And any McDonald's you see, any fast food place you see, this is the reality of cheap jobs, of unskilled labor. Mm-hmm. This is the reality of what that looks like. So the idea of like, oh, just like like being choosing a drug addiction or something. Like, when I'm saying that most people understand that their substance use disorder is their problem, I just more mean that it is a personal issue and one that came up like it's easier to see the path that it took to get there. But I also want to point out, like, I realize when I say the quote opiate of the masses, it is referring to things that are not actually opiates. Mm-hmm. There is a reason that the opiate of the masses speaks to the people right now. It's because, like, I still just remember us working at that mall store and, like, passing ibuprofen back and forth because we had to be in not tennis shoes, but doing freight in the back, and the only two people there, so we're also keeping the store clean, doing all the planograms, and dealing with all the customers.
Yep.
Because there's two of us, and but shipment came in that day, so I don't think it makes it very clear what Jack did before. He was a cushy grad student, but it's complicated.
Yeah.
I didn't mean to go step over there and get on a different soapbox. I just said something that made myself mad. But
well, anywho, obviously made it very clear that I also believe that Derwent is very much like Elon Musk in my brain. And I don't know for sure. Obviously, there are differences. This was the 70s. But we do know that King is very prophetic sometimes, given that how often he writes about car accidents. But I almost wonder if part of the reason, aside from the amazing humor that comes from the fact that Stephen King ignores Elon Musk all the time on Twitter, if he also maybe makes Stephen King think of Derwent, who was just another rich weirdo who kept, like, obsessively buying the same hotel again and again in different ways. And obviously there were some shady business deals going on, and it sounds like organized crime was involved. Does not change the fact that this was just very odd. And I also don't fucking like Elon Musk.
No.
You know, fuck that guy.
Well, I am trying to think, like, what in the 70s would have been, like, it's very Bondian. Like, could it be a James Bond thing? Or is it like a code for the Shah of Iran? Like, it feels like it's a thing. It feels like it has to be a thing.
Well, and I think it's also, some of it, though, is like, rich people just do this. Because it does shift around, like, taxes and shit like that. You move ownership. Like, hell, even like let's look at the Shawshank Redemption. Andy's thing with the guard, Byron, was to go, hey, do you trust your wife? Because the IRS will let you have a gift to a spouse up to $60K, no taxes. And then as long as you trust her, you give it to her, and then basically you get it back later. It's your money, and you don't have to pay taxes on it then.
No, that's fair. So I played with Google Translate a little bit. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you have yet to figure out, because Derwent seemed, because I in my head I've been saying it Derwent because I don't know, it just looked more like a Derwent to me, or Derwent, like just a kind of a soft, like, or maybe a slightly hard W. I don't know how you explain that W, but just not Derwent, right? We're like a Derwent. Well, it plays into this. So I shoved it into Google Translate because first I'm like, maybe it's German because it kind of looks German. I didn't get anything back, but I separated it into two words, Derwent. Still didn't get anything back from German, but Google Translate asked me, you want to try Dutch? I'm like, yeah, why not try Dutch? They're similar, it could be a Dutch thing. And I had to try it a couple other times, but I got something back from Dutch.
Okay.
In Dutch, Derwent, if you separate it into two, der and vent, it comes back as it went wrong.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, in Dutch, Derwent is it went wrong. If you change the spelling a little bit from dervent with an E to dervint with an I, it becomes it wins. That's why I thought it was really interesting. Obviously, it's spelt with an E. It's not spelt with an I.
Yeah.
Which would be it wins. It wins. But spelt with an E, it is it went wrong. Now it's Google Translate, so I don't know how right that is, but just there by itself is of the.
Okay.
So it could also mean of the wrong. This person is of the wrong, on the wrong side, of the weird maybe, or just of the wrong. But I really like the translation that it went wrong.
Yeah.
Or it wins. Because depending on when this hotel keeps changing hands and keeps going back into Dervin's hands, maybe it does have a connection to it. Something went wrong. It went wrong. And I'm going to be keeping my eyes out for any kind of spelling change at any point. Oh, they misspelled his name here or something. Because I think that even if it's just a throwaway moment, if we see that name at any point change spelling to W-I-N-T, that'll be for the like crazy murder board, because it'll be a moment when it wins.
Yeah.
But yeah,
that's fascinating.
That was just a weird little. Admittedly, it probably means nothing, and I do not know that King knows any Dutch at all, or why he would.
So, less important thing, but I feel like the same place that my fear of like the hedge animals came from led to me being creeped out so much by the weeping angels in Doctor Who, because like I hate those episodes. They are terrifying. And technically the weeping angels have like the little sharp teeth, so there's more reason for it. But legit, it's the same concept of if I don't look at you, suddenly you're coming for me, just like a Boo in Mario, which also freaked me out when I was a kid. No. And it's the same as like when I was younger, my grandpa on my dad's side tried to give me a ventriloquist dummy, and I would not take that thing. It freaked me out.
Why did he hate you?
He thought I was gonna love it. My dad got so mad I would not take that ventriloquist dummy. My grandpa was like accepting of it, at least to my face. I don't know if he was like pissed, behind. I was a kid. Behind closed doors, he may have said something to my dad, and that's why my dad was so mad about it. But I would not take that ventriloquist dummy from him.
You made the right decision. He was trying to pass down the family curse. He wanted it away from him.
Probably.
He's like, this is the only way I can get rid of it.
Just one of the family curses. There's others.
Skips a generation, so it has to go to you.
But I feel like that's clearly coming from no, this thing isn't supposed to be alive and moving. No. It needs to stop being alive and moving.
We couldn't be friends if you had accepted it.
Got really into ventriloquism.
I'd have to burn it. I kind of want to find it and burn it now.
The question is, would we have still met, or would I have become a famous ventriloquist at 9?
I feel like, but that's the kind of people we used to have to our school assemblies. So we'd have met, at least there, and I would have known in my heart that this was the darkest timeline. And I need to burn that fucking ventriloquist dummy.
What if me becoming, a ventriloquist prodigy was actually what pulls us out of the darkest timeline that we're living in right now?
Are you saying you becoming a ventriloquist dummy means no Trump?
Maybe.
I'm still burning the dummy. I would take 20 more years of Trump. And you know how I feel. That man's gonna make me put female on all of my documents and shit, and I will take that over you having a cursed ventriloquist dummy. That is how good of a friend I am.
So obviously when they talked to the doctor, they were talking a lot about the doctor is talking about the conscious versus the unconscious, and because, my entire thesis of this podcast for me is that the Dark Tower is a manifestation of Stephen King's mind. I found that kind of interesting, and I also do feel like it shows how much Stephen King tried to put in effort to make sure that he did get his shit with, like, Jack right. And we know that later down the line when we get Misery, he did consult with mental health professionals.
Yeah.
But the fact that, yeah, I know Jack talks about how things are done to him.
His blackout anger, I wanted to touch on, mainly because I'm telling on myself a little bit here, and I do that a lot in this podcast, but this is, I think, a bigger tell on myself. I also have blackout anger. That is a symptom of a lot of mental health problems. It, for me, is a symptom of PTSD, of big trauma. Very quick story. I was at a concert. I got near the mosh pit. Anybody who's familiar with mosh pits is cringing or laughing at me right now. I am not a mosher. But I don't even think I was trying to get to the front. I was just trying to pass through, and I got too close to the mosh pit and also got stuck there. I couldn't pass any further. Someone started trying to, like, mosh me. I ignored it, like, the first 2 times. I think it's 2 because at one point I had full-on blacked out. I call them redding out. I had full-on redded out, like, gone anger. As far as I know, what I did was grab them by the shirt, shout not to touch me again, and threw them on the floor. And I don't remember what happened after that. I know that I made it to the other side of the auditorium, I think, because other people did not want to get thrown. And I was like 19, I want to say, because I think it was the MXPX concert that it happened at, which is a weird place to mosh. So maybe it was 3 Days Grace, but that also seems like a weird place to mosh.
I don't think either of those are weird places to mosh.
You think so?
No, yeah. I think, you know what? It would be weird to mosh to, like, maybe, like, Taylor Swift. But even then, I feel like some Swifties could get in on it.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I think it was MXPX because I wanted to be closer to the front when they played Responsibility, of course, because I'm basic. And then I wanted to get back to the back of the room, which is where, like, I was at this concert with Kat. I don't know if you figured this out by me asking her questions about it. I wanted to get back to where we had, like, a very nice little open area in the very tiny theater that anything happened in where we were.
Yeah.
And I remember making it back, and I remember laughing about that story for a lot of years until I realized how fucked up it was. So the story that Jack tells about, like, the many times that he's blacked out in anger kind of makes sense to me. Like, I recognize this because I've also had other times I've done this, but they are times where I feel threatened. Me or somebody that I care about, I feel like they are physically threatened. After many years of therapy, I don't have them anymore. I absolutely recognized immediately what he's talking about. And he seems to revel in them a little bit. Yeah. It's that thing of, like, well, if you sting me, I'll sting you back. And that's what makes him think about George and what he did to that kid. And what's making me wonder if tires are getting slashed at all. Because he also won't admit that he was moving the clock. Yeah. Or why he was moving the clock. Because he thinks that if said clock was moved, it was, you know, to help with his embarrassment over his stutter and, you know, to help everybody else because it was clear there was a problem. When in reality, what it seems like is the kid stuttered because he knew Jack didn't like him. And so he was getting anxious and worked up. He was stuttering because he knew he didn't have the full amount of time to present his arguments, because this can't be the first time Jack has done this with a clock. No. The other kids all feel uncomfortable because they can sense Jack's hostility. And the last thing that I will say out of this chapter is that it's interesting that Jack can see the self, or not chapter, but section, that it's interesting to see that Jack can see the self, like, destruction that he does. That's so common with this shit. And it's not always like, well, it will make him the victim again. Yeah. It's more that he has such low self-esteem and low self-confidence. When things are going good for him, it feels incongruent with the way that he feels inside. And it feels incongruent with the sick parts of his brain telling him, you might as well just be an alcoholic again, and you might as well just, give in to these urges to be terrible, because that's all you'll ever be anyways. And when he is harping really hard on every mistake that he makes, it's, well, I might as well just quit. Like he's doing a phenomenal job right now as the caretaker at the Overlook.
Mm-hmm.
But to him, that's almost like failure, because this job is beneath him. And more than that, he always wants to be right. And in reality, he has already decided that he is such a piece of shit that he will never keep up with this. How can I be good? How can I actually be a good, nice man? I know I'm an asshole. How can I be good at this job and keep up this job and care for my wife and son and stay sober and keep a job and do all of these things? I know that I can't do these things. So the logical step is I'm going to erupt all of it, because also, if he grew up in a home with an abusive dad, he is used to big volatile changes.
Yeah.
I'm making a big up and down motion with my hand. He's used to his life going up and down, up and down, up and down. And so once it gets steady, it's boring and it's kind of scary, because it's not what he's used to, and he's waiting for the other shoe to drop.
Yeah.
And if it's never dropping, he will just drop it himself. So he has to self-sabotage, because then he has any level of control over how bad it's about to be. He will decide how bad it's going to be, because he will design the badness. I'm seeing a lot of myself in Jack. Don't know if you caught that. I just see a lot of, I think anybody with big mental health problems, or anybody with big substance use disorder problems, probably can see, like, he's very well done.
Yeah.
For those things. And I keep being surprised because of when this book was made, because we're still fighting to be seen as people, and people that are deserving of care and less stigma, and just that, like, humans that have illnesses.
Well, and I think that leads into the final point I have, which is that it's a very universal experience in some ways. Because one quote that really stood out to me was when he is looking at the little model of the Overlook. It says, "You could open the house simply by pulling it apart. It opened on a hidden hinge. The inside was a disappointment. The walls were painted, but the place was mostly hollow." Now, I love a good "I'm broken" analogy, like the whole, like that meme that's like the light broken but still working or whatever. It's like, yeah, me too. Machine, me too. I fucking adore those things. Or like Baldur's Gate has a great one. When you're in the arcane tower, before you get the elevator fixed, you take Astarion in there. If you interact with the button, he says, "Funny, it doesn't look broken. Then again, none of us do." And it's like, dear God.
I love that quote.
That is amazing. In this bit with the model Overlook, it just absolutely hits that same spot in my brain, because you can open anyone up just by pulling it apart, and we all have hidden hinges, and we personally always find our insides disappointing. The same reason I'm not convinced that I could tell my younger self that, like, this shit doesn't matter successfully. I think we all kind of feel like we're so easily figured out, and we're shallow, and we're not worth it. We don't have any substance to us, and we're gonna get found out. Everyone's gonna find out how just shallow and vague we are as human beings.
Imposter syndrome.
Yes. So I do feel like this is very beautifully real, especially because Jack is struggling so hard with his cravings for alcohol. That is what he would be reaching to, because then any of the bad stuff he does, any of the mistakes he makes, he can blame on the alcohol. Oh, I was drunk. I broke my kid's arm, but the booze made me break my kid's arm. And I think that's why the bike hit him so hard, because there didn't seem to be an owner to that bike. What did he do and he wasn't the driver. So what did he do? Al was the driver, and he wasn't sitting there going, well, you know, Al's the one who like hit that person, because there wasn't a person to hit. Nothing happened other than they were in danger, but it broke, I think, in his brain how he could justify outcome to a source.
Well, I'd like to follow that just by telling you and telling everybody that these problems have existed for centuries, but our society now, we have turned things like imposter syndrome up exponentially. Social media has turned that shit up exponentially.
There's a reason Elon Musk really wants Senpai to notice him.
Yeah, and as long as you are a reasonable human who, you know, because I was going to say as long as you're kind, but honestly, you don't have to be kind if that's not in your heart. But you do have to be reasonable to other people, and you really just live your life in a way that hurts nobody else. You're okay. And nobody is dying to find anybody else out. Like, Kat, if you told me today that you are the best podcast maker in the world, I'm not digging to find out that that's not true, because I want that to be true for you. If I tell you that I am the dog whisperer and all tiny dogs love me, I don't think that you're going to try to counteract that.
No.
I think that if we met somebody on the street who was walking around screaming about how it's Reno, they're always walking around screaming, okay? Screaming that, like, they wear jeans better than anybody else on the planet. We would let them have it. Cool. They are the jeans wearer. And I think that goes for you too, lobsters. It will never fix your anxiety and it will never fix your embarrassment, but like, I am too anxious when I walk into a store to be looking or judging anybody else. I am just anxious that I have to be around groups of people who are making a lot of noise, and anxious that I'm going to forget things on my list. Don't park your cart in the middle of an aisle and walk away from it to get something, and I won't have any thoughts about you. Do that, though, and I'm judging. And I just think that we, as a society, keep moving more towards being Jack Torrance. Thinking that there is a spotlight on us all the time, and then being terrified of what that spotlight is showing.
Yeah.
And I just promise you, that's not a spotlight, baby. That is the sun coming to burn us all to death.
Slight reading adjustment. The next reading episode is not going to be for the next part of The Shining. And instead, we are going to be reading Stephen King's On Writing. We will be reading through the mini forewords up through the end of the section titled CV. So when you hit the part that actually says On Writing, stop. I mean, if you're reading along with us, at least you can read whatever you want. Thank you. Bye.
Now, I believe we have to pull a tarot card. I can't keep giving you weird, like, trying to be a pep talk, but actually probably making it so much worse and probably getting some of it cut. Let me look. So last time, hilariously, we pulled the Hierophant, which embodies the need for conformity, but what I thought was more interesting was that it also covers the need for acceptance to fit in with society, which, considering it's The Shining, they feel very like meet the keeping up with the Joneses, meet the Joneses.
Keeping up with the Joneses.
So it just felt quite right. Let's see. We're gonna go ahead and pull the next card. I just watched Kat shuffle the deck. I think you could hear it.
Assuming I don't cut it out, yes.
You shouldn't. You should leave the shuffling. Do a shuffle here that you won't cut out. Just they can hear the cards shuffle. All right, I have requested an audible shuffle that will not be cut, so that way you, the lobsters, can know that the deck has been deeply shuffled. There, I got you a little card ASMR. I'm guessing it's the 5 of Wands because it looks like it's the 5 of Logs.
Yeah. They are having an epic sword battle. I'm sorry.
So it could have been the 5 of Swords. I'm very confused. On this card is 5 men. It seems like one could be a woman, but I don't think so. They are all dressed in colorful jerkins over either green or two of them are wearing red tights, wearing different red, green, or yellow shoes. They are on a grassy field. It does look like there's a puddle or a very small stream that one is bestride. And they are all holding like a massive, like the best stick your dog could ever find. Or very tiny logs, which also have like sprigs of like new growth coming off of them. They are against a very clear blue sky.
And it is a very appropriate card.
Ooh.
The 5 symbolizes strife and conflict, usually indicative of a messaging problem. It's time to listen to others. Which is why those 5 dudes are like really struggling.
Yeah.
With their giant sticks.
They're not following the IKEA directions.
No. I guess we will see if Jack listens to others.
And that's the 5 of Wands.
That's the 5 of Wands.
And we're sure that it's the 5 of Wands?
Yes, it's the 5 of Wands.
Okay. Well, my dear sweet lobsters, I do believe that with that, it might be time for you to go listen to some others. So go now. There are other podcasts than these.
You can email us at manyconstantworlds@gmail.com, DM us on Instagram, and check out our Patreon. All links can be found in the description of our episodes.
We work really hard for the Patreon, and Megan gets mad if we don't say that.
We work hard for that money.
so hard for that money.